Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the Minister and to everyone from the Road Accident Fund who's come to present us today. A little bit of a follow-on, and I don't want to get set for too long on the legal issue, but I do want to ask the understanding of a question of law. When does the law change? So when are you legally able to follow a particular line that might be before the courts? And my understanding of that, and certainly the Deputy Minister says, you've got to follow the law. So my understanding is the law only changes once the court changes it. So at the moment, the law is basically requires you as a social insurance fund to report as a social insurance fund. You actually aren't allowed to report as anything else because the law hasn't changed. It might be a matter before court. You certainly had a full bench which have turned you down, and you're now relying on the Chief Justice. But the reality is, and he may well change the situation, the law doesn't change until he actually says so, basically, or until he says not, basically. So the question I'm asking here, because the Deputy Minister quite rightly said in the SARS case, you've got to follow the law. Why are you not following the law in this case? In the case with the Auditor General, why are you not following the correct procedures as laid down in law? And then the second question I want to ask is I want to ask a question of the board. How do you feel in terms of the King principles of actually facilitating what is effectively, I don't want to use the word an illegal course of action, but you're not following the law, basically. And are you not concerned that you could be seen as delinquent directors by enabling a situation where you continually get your disclaimers because you're not following the law? So I want to get an understanding from you as to when you think the law changes. And if you think I'm right by saying it only changes once the court changes it, and you are obligated to follow the law until the court changes it. Okay, I'd just like an answer on that one, and then we can carry on.
So can I, for ease of, so every time a member asks a question, please just proceed with an answer. I don't need to interject between you. I'll only make interventions of time and clarity.
No, thanks, Chair. As it were, in law, there is a thing called eau de grace principle. Eau de grace principle says an administrator's decision or an administrative decision remains in force until reviewed and set aside. A decision of the board or RAF to go through a thing called an accounting policy change in an administrative decision. No one has said that thing and set it aside. No one. So at this point, there is another principle in law called funtus. Once an administrator has taken a decision, they are not allowed to revisit that whole decision unless it's changed by the court. So if I take a decision to appoint someone and I realize I've made a mistake, I go to court and set aside that decision of mine. I don't go and change it on my own unless then I'll be puntus officio. So there are those principles. But let's then deal with this other issue of legality. So when you go to court and the court below decision is either appealed, there is provision 18.1 of the Supreme Court Act that says that that decision is suspended, of the court is suspended until the appeal is heard and finalized. So all those things are applications of law that we have followed. And I must emphasize that Section 34 of the Constitution is quite clear about who can approach the court. Any person can approach the court to resolve adjudicate over a dispute through application of law, and that's exactly what the RAF has done. So, so far as we are concerned, all those principles given, we believe very strongly that we are on the right side of the law. Thanks.
Okay, it was my understanding that the full bench of the High Court or the Supreme Court basically told you to stick with the social insurance fund. And I know that you've gone forward to the Chief Justice to ask for that to be overturned. But to my mind, that's the law.
Once you appeal in terms of Rule 18.1 of the Supreme Court for Supreme Court rules, a decision taken by the court is suspended. So suspended means it's not in effect. So that which the court has said, once we appeal or put in our leave to appeal, is suspended. We have done that, Chair, I must emphasize. We came to this committee earlier on the Logodi issue, where we were told we are going to pay our, we are hit with the personal cost orders, as both me and the board. And I even said that, I said, well, we have appealed that judgment. We have won that judgment. The SCA has overturned that. But between those things, we didn't pay because it was suspended by the appeal. So once you appeal, 18.1 of the court rule says it's suspended. That's the law.
Okay. Then I'm going to follow on with regards to the documents that you require to have a valid claim. Okay, you have your board minute, and I see that Acting Judge Kolong in the Eastern Cape basically said that you cannot turn down a claim by asking for people's proof of income and various other things. So in other words, they're saying that you've got to stick to the provisions of the Act, and that you can't, that your board minute, which places additional requirements on people, is actually not valid. So my concern there is that you're rejecting a lot. You're actually rejecting a lot of claims that are potentially valid in terms of the law, and potentially valid in terms of the RAF Act, in terms of the requirements of the section. So, yeah, it's Judge Kolong in the Eastern Cape Court in the last few days, I think, has basically said that you cannot demand proof of income from people, and you can't reject a claim on that basis. Okay, so my concern is that we're seeing the financial we're seeing your financial statements, but it's based on your board minute, which obviously is an issue because you're asking for documentation that the courts have basically said that you don't, that are not required. So how accurate are your outstanding liabilities if you're asking for documentation that's not required, or things that are actually valid claims that you're saying are invalid claims?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to rely on the Auditor General at all material times, whether we agree with them or we disagree with them.
Yeah.
You are of the opinion that they are right when they are saying that we are using a wrong standard. But it would seem you have difficulties, Honorable Member, in finding, in relying on what they say when they say our liabilities are the way they are. Because we don't disagree on that. So at least let's rely on them consistently. If we rely on them consistently, we differ with them on that, we don't differ with them on that. So they do look at our liabilities and they express an opinion on them. Okay, we disagree on one aspect of the liability, which is the backlog and how we evaluate that from an actuarial basis and all that, and that's the only thing. So the Eastern Cape High Court has got views. Once we realize that, you will find that we appeal those. Because how do we arrive at a point when we are able to determine your loss of earnings if we don't know how much you earn? That's absurdity of the West Order. There can't be someone who can tell us that Collins earns this much, but he must not prove that he earns that much for you to calculate how much he earns. That's quite absurd. And we we will, of course, appeal that if that is the outcome that we have received. You said it's a few days ago. It will probably be making its way to the head office, and of course, we'll appeal it. Because we don't think that... I mean, we had another one that we are also appealing at the Constitutional Court, at the SCA, that suggested that we must agree to people not giving us copies of IDs, or ID numbers at least, for us to know the hospital serviced call-ins. Now they say, no, you don't have to give. I mean, the guy can come and claim a draft and we must just give them, without them identifying who they were servicing. It's absurd, right? So all we are saying is, courts do err at times, and when they make mistakes, that's why there's a higher court that we'll go to. Because when we disagree, we'll disagree. But you can imagine the floodgates that says anyone can come and claim that they were earning this much and they don't have to prove it, because we don't want. But also there is a provision of, I think it's section 4 of the Act, powers and functions of the fund. The powers and functions of the fund shall include A, the stipulation of terms and conditions upon which claims for compensation contemplated in 3 shall be administered. I'm sure that must mean that we must put terms and conditions. And those terms and conditions include the documents we would require from someone for us to be able to settle the claim. The aim of RAF is never to sit there and say to people, you are not so entitled to this money. It's not our, but we are given a kitty that belongs to South Africans that we must manage. And we must manage this thing diligently, as if it was our own. You can't just come and give someone money like that and say, no, we are told we must not ask for proof. So where there is judgments that are saying, don't ask for proof, we are going to have to strenuously argue differently. And of course, the only way you can do is appeal those matters.
Okay, and then if the courts don't agree with you?
Well, we'll take it to the Constitutional Court. If the Constitutional Court does not agree with us, we'll let it be. But we'll come to this committee and say, they are saying we must pay people that do not have proof that they are earning, loss of earnings. It's fine. I mean, if they then decide, they've decided. But all we can do is that if it goes to the SCA and we lose, we'll take it to the highest court because we want that decision. And once that decision is taken, of course it becomes law. Then we'll adhere to it, as it were. Thanks.
Okay. With regards to your investment income, I see there's been quite a significant increase in the amount. I think it's about close on 500 million, around about 498 million, I think it is, which tells me that you have probably somewhere between 8 and 10 billion on call or invested in some way throughout the year. And I see that you've got a CIO. I was actually just wondering why you have a chief investment officer in the fund and why you don't just have a treasurer. What kind of investments is the fund making that you need a CIO in the fund? Because to my mind, if you do have a liquidity requirement and you need to have a lot of cash on hand to be able to pay people out, you really shouldn't be doing anything more than having a cash call account or money on call with the bank. So I'd like to know what the reasons are for having a CIO at the fund.
Look, I think we are going to get into
Sorry, Honorable Atkinson, can you switch off your mic so the sound isn't this? Yeah.
We're going to get into a space where generally how we manage is different. So Honorable Atkinson may want to call an investment officer a treasurer. It's semantics, what do you call them? This person must sit there and do an asset and liability management. We choose to call that person a chief investment officer. Honorable Atkinson says this person must be a treasurer. Then another one will say, well, in the structure, that person must fall under the CFO because that's finance. Right? And we say, well, we think it's different because our view of liabilities and asset management goes far away from that. It goes beyond that. So it just depends. We have decided to have a CIO for obvious reasons. Our reason was that in our view, we were going to get to a point where we are allowed to pay in installments. That means asset and liability matching means you must go and buy assets and manage those assets for the coming liabilities that you have on your books. And that's our view. So depending on what you want to look at, and you know, there is a view that seems to suggest that at rough what we sit is look at and manage a call account. It goes far beyond that. Because when we started, I must emphasize, our liability book was a dog's breakfast. We had situations where someone was owed 8 years and someone was owed 30 days. And we said, it doesn't make sense, which is why there is a big 180 days thing. So we squeezed that thing. We did what is called liability stratification. And that thing is done by people in capital markets. It goes an intense way of looking at it. You don't naturally get an accountant. You don't naturally get a guy in finance. You get people that have worked in financial markets. And we then had to get people that have got specialties in that to do that work. Lucky enough, some of us have been in financial markets, so we understand how that thing works, and that's how we brought this thing of the chief investment officer into the space. So that's what I'm saying. It's a management thing. I didn't want to go deeper into it, but I don't want not to answer you. But it's a management issue and management decisions. And sometimes you might not agree with the way we go about doing it, but it's the way we have done it, and there's nothing wrong with it. Because if there was something wrong, then there would have been a finding of some sort or something like that, which is not the case. But it's a management, it's also a management choices that we at times take. Thanks.
Thanks. Just digging a little bit further to what you were saying, you mentioned the fact that you may look at purchasing assets because of your long-term liabilities. What kind of assets would you be looking at?
Sorry, Honorable Ansin, I just want to ask a question of clarity. Can you switch off your mic? Because and if my recollection is wrong, please let me know. So last time the Road Accident Fund was here, I asked a specific question, which was, what kind of investments do you engage in? And I followed that up and I said, is it a call account? And UCO said yes. I said, is that all? And you said yes. And we can consult the record. I then asked you that day whether you have a treasurer or not. You remember that interaction? I asked if you have a treasurer or not. And if my recollection is wrong, please let me know. Your answer was in the affirmative. I then asked you as a follow-up why you needed a chief investment officer if you have a treasurer. Now, I'm quite happy to go and consult the record, and I need to ask this for clarity because we cannot, I referred earlier on to this institution accepting two contradictory reports and adopting both of them, which is a joke. And I don't want us to get into that position again. So I just want you to disabuse me of the belief that you may be telling us something that is different from what you said last time. But I've asked the team to consult the record if they can. I remember I sat here and I was asking questions myself in that regard. So let me ask again. Have you had a treasurer before concurrently with a chief investment officer? At which point did you then decide to forego a treasurer? And are you telling the committee that the chief investment officer effectively performs the duties of the treasurer, and that the only thing here is about naming conventions, but otherwise the committee should have nothing to worry about? The concern I raised at the time was the fact that you said you only have a call account. And by the way, I am not suggesting you're not allowed to take part in investments, but I went with your answer at the time. So can you please clarify me here about that interaction and what you are telling the committee today?
Yeah, Chair. I remember vividly that at that point I said, but Chair, we are getting into the space of management. when you were asking about who's sitting in what position and all that. That's what I said. You can go to the Hansard, I'm sure. At some point, the record will say it. We have never had a treasurer at RAF. We have a chief investment officer who's acting. I don't know where people are getting the word treasurer from, and that's why I'm saying it's nuanced. People, different names, different. This thing is going to always result, Chair, in a situation where we must now go to the.
Mr. Letsoalo, you're not answering me. I need you to start here. I asked you that day. I asked you that day, what investments do you engage in? And your answer was, it's just a call account. I asked a follow-up question, which was, if it's just a call account, why do you need a chief investment officer? Right? Because there's a certain, names matter. I can't call a CFO a managing director because I choose to do so. These roles matter. A chief investment officer's job is to determine and drive the investment strategy of a firm in order to maximize returns. A treasurer does something fundamentally different, Mr. Letsoalo, and that is to do what you were describing just now. Managing assets and liabilities and doing the matching and helping the organization manage its cash flow so that it can meet its ongoing obligations and so on, and to also manage whatever investments the firm may engage in order to serve that purpose. That's what a treasurer does. A chief investment officer's role is limited. I do not think we must get into a discussion here, and it's patronizing to the committee, I must say, where you tell us you can choose what naming convention to give to something that does not apply to it. Please don't do that. This conversation is coming along well, and it's not appropriate for you, Mr. Letsoalo, to say you can call a role anything. And you did say last time that I was getting into management space. I let it go. But this question is valid. So, is your position today that you do much more than just have a call account, as you told me last time? Are you changing your answer?
Chair, you're going to have to let me answer, because you see, one is you are making assertions about things I understand quite well and have done. You are saying a CIO's job is to maximize returns.
Mr. Letsoalo, please start here. You gave an answer to this committee last time. Your answer today to the same question is different. Which version is correct?
There's nothing different, Chair. I'm saying it again. We have a call account, and that's what we have at the Road Accident Fund.
You don't have investments with anybody, not with the Reserve Bank, not with anybody.
Meaning?
Now I'm saying you may decide to take a portion of the cash that you have sitting in bank and invest it, because the Reserve Bank is mandated to do some of this work, for instance, or another institution. I'm not specifically au fait with your legislation. My understanding is that you are allowed to get into that kind of thing. So I'm not saying you shouldn't. But last time I asked you a specific question. And that question was, do you engage in anything other than running a call account? And your answer was you only have a call account. Now you've just said, just now to Honorable Atkinson, that you do much more than that. Wasn't that so? That's what you said. Please explain to me what more than that is in relation to the answer you gave last time.
I said, Chair, there is a view that all we do is manage a call account. We do more than that. I talked about certification of the loan book. I talked about asset and liability matching. That's what I said, Chair. So that's what I'm saying. We have a call account, but a person that is in a CIO position, currently the RAF does more than that. I said there must not be a view that, and I said it even in the last meeting, that there's a view that all people do is manage a call account, which is not true. Okay? So I'm saying, again, Chair, the RAF, so far as I know, does not have a treasurer, has never had a treasurer, it has got a CIO. That CIO does certain things, and I've said this, Chair, depending on the model you adopt, the different ways of looking at this person and his job description is totally different. So there can be a treasurer that does some of the work of the CIO in cases where there is no CIO at all, and then works under the CFO. That's what I've been saying, Chair. So I repeat again, we run a call account. There's not the only thing that the CIO does. There are duties and functions that are under a CIO that we do. So that's what I'm answering, Chair. I'm answering again. We have never had a treasurer since I've arrived at, I've never had a treasurer since we have arrived at RAF. So I'm repeating it again, Chair.
So, Mr. Letsoalo, let me read to you what the committee's secretariat recorded of our interaction that day. And we don't have to delay ourselves, but I need to make clear to you, and I had made this point to the chair, that it is important that when people deal with this committee, they are truthful and consistent. So, these are the minutes of that meeting. The chairperson asked for clarity on whether the chief investment officer looked after the entity's call account, saying there needed to be a conversation on whether there needed to be a chief investment officer. He asked that the RAF send a submission explaining the need for a chief investment officer. Mr. Letsoalo said that the chief investment officer would be needed when the RAF began to pay installments. The RAF was in the process of making changes, and the submission would lay out why a chief investment officer would be necessary. This is what the committee recorded that day. Now, I'm not going to litigate the specifics all the way, right? But Mr. Letsoalo, I remember very well that interaction of ours. The reason I raised the issue of a treasurer and chief investment officer is because you couldn't tell us what the CIO was doing. And this is what is recorded in the minutes of this committee. Let's not do that. Because you gave a different answer fundamentally to what you are giving now.
No, Chair. You have said to me, I said there is a treasurer there. And this must be in the record somewhere. Because you are the one that said to me, I said there was a treasurer. There's never been a treasurer there. There is a person who's acting in the position of CIO. And I said that person does totally different things. And I said we are now getting involved in the space of management.
Okay, Mr. Letsoalo, you have not answered again. And I'm now making a statement, and we can go back to Honorable Atkinson. The answers you are giving today, and you know, one thing I'm going to follow up on is this full record of this discussion. Mr. Letsoalo, it's not appropriate to give different versions of the same thing to the committee. And even on this occasion that you are answering, you are skirting the issue of this answer that I have just read back to you. That's the first thing. The second thing is we will, Mr. Letsoalo, get into the issues of management, because when an entity tells us that someone has the title of anything but they perform something different, and if your version is that management is at liberty to decide on naming conventions and what those people do, and the committee may not ask questions in that regard, then we are going to have a conflict. I will ask the committee to send you both the recording and the transcript of the meeting. But this recollection here, because I've asked the colleagues there to send me the minute, because I knew I was not crazy. And your answer is inconsistent, sir. Mr. Atkinson.
If I may beg your indulgence, may I request that because the issue around the CIO would also be in the presentation as vacant and recruitment underway and position advertised, that at your discretion, the committee be briefed on the roles and responsibilities of each of the executives in order to provide a clarity on the matters. And that secondly, because this matter is arising for the second time, around investments, that the committee be briefed around the activities taking place on investment, because I fundamentally believe, one, it will provide clarity, but it is of material, consequence, let me put it that way, to the finances of the entity, so that the matter can be clarified, notwithstanding the injunction that you have pointed to and the provision you will make of the transcript, so that clarity be provided. But I believe it would be to the benefit of the committee to avoid a back and forth on this matter. Thank you.
So, Honorable DM, are you saying that clarity will be provided in this meeting?
Well, I'm suggesting, Chair, that we may have to come back to you on that. I note, one, you would look at slide number 18. It speaks to the executive, the senior officials who must be vetted. They are all chief something in one way or the other as the executive. And therefore, it may be important that each component provide you with the work that it's doing. But I'm specific on the investment because it's the second time it has been raised. And what is clear is, substantively, we have not looked into whatever, or rather the committee has not looked into substantively the investment work, so that there's clarity about how it's structured and what it is doing, so that the oversight that you will play is in itself clarified for yourselves.
Okay. Now, thank you, DM. We'll in the course of the conversation, I want Honorable Atkinson to finish, but I remembered clearly the discussion that we had, and it's important that we have consistency. It's okay if things have changed, but we can't accept any version that gets given, depending on what day it is. Honorable Atkinson, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chair. Could I also ask why your CIO is not here today?
Chair, I don't know why there is a view that he's not here. The acting CIO is here today.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, if you can just make clear who that is.
Mr. Sfutla Mudiba is here.
So I think your chair wants to say something, Mr. Sorry, Honorable Atkinson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to add to what the DM is saying, that seeing that this position is still vacant and it's going through the recruitment process, I'm suggesting that we hold that process pending this discussion, because obviously there's going to be a reconciliation between the job description and the role and the current role, and until this matter is resolved. And let me apologize, Chair. When I was introducing the executives that are here, I actually omitted to introduce the acting CIO. He is in the room.
Thanks very much. I just want to move on to fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And I see the large bulk of your fruitless and wasteful expenditure is around the call center, which obviously you didn't follow procedures in the tendering process for getting that call center in place. Has there been any? Yeah, well, according to the financial statements, they said that you didn't follow the correct procedures for tendering for the call center thing. No,
I'm not aware of that. It's not certainly not in our. It is certainly not in our report.
Okay, as my understanding was that it was one of the items under fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Not okay. All right, I'm done with my questioning. Thanks, Chair.